So recently YouTube recommended me this video by Woody Ling. What if English had Dutch spelling rules? YouTube certainly was right to recommend it. I am Dutch and I find languages interesting. However, the first frame of the video immediately shows a very obvious mistake. Well, several, but I immediately noticed one, because it's on the first line of text. Let's just take this whole video line by line. First he writes, "Hey, my name is Carson Wody." First problem, he writes is with a Z at the end, because the Dutch S would be voiceless, so it would be is. However, in Dutch you can't really have words that end with a Z like that. It only really occurs in loanwords, and it will probably be pronounced as an S anyways, because think of the word quiz. In Dutch, you'd say quiz. Hear that S sound? This is also something he realizes later when he spells based as P-E-E-S-D with a D at the end and doesn't turn it into a T. Then we get to Carson. It is pronounced as Carson and is also the Dutch word for candles. His name, however, is Carson, or he's American, so Carson, not Carson. To get the R sound closer, you could use a single A, so you get that R sound instead of that A sound. It is shorter than the English R sound, so I get why he chose the A sound, because it's also longer. However, it is also a different vowel. The rest of the word is fine. I mean, the closest you can get to an American R would be an R. Same with A for I. It's not quite the same, but you're not going to get any closer than that. Woody, however, is just plain wrong. I mean, in Dutch, as he points out, two O's together is pronounced as O. He does, however, not remember that in Dutch we have an OE digraph, which is pronounced as OE. In my opinion, that's much closer to the OO sound in Woody than O is to that. Next sentence, the his is probably fine. It's probably the best option. It's not quite accurate, but Then we have Nat. That's very American, but Carson is American, so I'll let it slide. A British person could probably just spell it N-O-T, and it would be pronounced as not, which is probably closer to not than Nat is. Spelling, however, is just wrong again. In Dutch, you need to duplicate the consonant on the border between two syllables, or else the vowel before it will turn into a long sound, which is actually the same as in English, sort of, because if you spelled spelling with a single L, it would be something like speling in English, right? Same in Dutch, it would be speling, which is a different word which means something like play or tolerance in design. Also some other things. All he needs to do is just add another L and it's fine. Reform could be spelled differently, but I understand it, because he says reform. Some accents will pronounce it as reform instead. In that case, you would want to add another I before the E in reform to make it reform instead of reform. But that's an accent specific thing in English, so it doesn't really matter that much. It is fine apart from the Z like before. Adaptation is odd. A doesn't really occur in standard Dutch too often, except in loanwords, mainly from Latin, where it is often pronounced as A rather than but sometimes it is pronounced as In standard Dutch, you'll see some words with AE pronounced as A. Those are mainly words that haven't changed since older forms of Dutch, where the A sound was spelled with an A and an E. So there are words where AE is pronounced as especially in dialects in my region. Adaptation is another very Americanly done word. I would pronounce this in Dutch as adaptation, so you'll instantly notice that's different from adaptation, which is my learned British pronunciation of that word. If Carson were British, it would probably be spelled with just an E to create adaptation instead. I'll also stop pointing out his Americanness now. Dutch. He spells it D-E-T-S-J. In Dutch, that E here would not create a strut vowel or a schwa. Certainly not in this word. It could in other contexts. This word would be pronounced as Dutch. It would probably be better to use the letter U here to create Dutch. He is right that the letter E is sometimes pronounced as an but it can't be pronounced like that here. I don't know the exact rules about this, but I think it may be because it's a stressed syllable and it comes before a consonant. This becomes clear when you see the Dutch word gletsjer. I understand he might not encounter that word in Dutch very often, but it's the same concept as the word met, het, klets, mes, test, wekker. These are all the same sound. Next, spelling and the are back. How is fine. You don't need that W because that's implied in Dutch. You without it, it would sound like how. With it, it sounds like how. It's probably best to get rid of it for clarity. 4 is interesting. The Dutch double O in front of an R is indeed pronounced like O, but that sound cannot be O. It has to be the long O. And in the English, that kind of, in the word for, it depends if the word is stressed or not. And I get why he decided to go with the double O there. It's just the way he says the sentence, it doesn't quite need that O. It can be O. It is the same sound with the single O in that case, just shorter. So it would be for instead of for. Wait. Joe? He knows how to spell you in Dutch. He knows the U sound. Why did he spell Woody as Wody then? The sound he makes for U actually sounds further from the Dutch U than the Woody sound, I think. Toe could be spelled as T-O-E, like you. Te sounds a bit off to me, but this is probably also because of stress in Carson's accent. Wood, it's the same as Woody before. He could just do an O and an E and it would sound much closer, because this is just vote, as opposed to wood is what it would sound like if he used an OE instead of an OO. In examples, he ignores that the Dutch G sound is pronounced as g. He could probably just use a K and an S or an X instead to create examples instead of examples. C even could do it. This is another case where he uses that Z that would be pronounced as an S anyways. Of is just wrong. He says he uses the E as a schwa sound here. He himself does not pronounce the word of using a schwa.
Of.
A Dutch person reading this would also not read that E as a schwa, it would be ev. So it's probably just better to use an O here because it's closer, it would be of. Ending a word with a V is also not something that happens in Dutch. I get why he chose to do this. An F would sound closer to, well, an F. An F would be voiceless and he doesn't want that. But this is, again, not really valid in Dutch. English. Of note here is that the NG sound in Dutch is ng, not ng, like in English. As it's written here, it would be pronounced English, not English. This is another thing that's just, it's the closest thing he can get, so it's fine. Written has the same problem as spelling before. You need to double that T to make it not written. Or language has problems. Again, we have the same sound from English before. Then you have a U and an A for the I sound in language. The I sound. That's not something you can do in Dutch. This would just be pronounced as UA. I don't know why he thought that a U and an A would be pronounced as that. I don't know. Then he uses DJ for the J sound. He's right that in French loanwords the J can form a J sound. He himself comes with a counterexample, hondje, but he decides not to even try fixing it, even though he can do that easily by inserting a Z between the D and the J. As it's written here, you'd probably pronounce it as lenguages or lenguages. Now is wrong. He should use an OU or an AU here, not a UI. UI is pronounced like OU, not OW. He gives examples of how he thinks UI is pronounced, but they're just wrong. NAU is probably the safe answer here. Now instead of now. What is odd to me, as we pronounce that E as you would in the English word wet. So it would be wet. It is probably easier to just use an A here to create what. It's not the same, I understand, it's just closer, I think. The same problem with understand. The way he writes it here, it would be pronounced as understand. That sounds like a Minecraft thing, I guess. I'll just read the whole thing out as he's written it. This has been edited together because I can't do that in one take, I'm sorry. He understands the G thing, that it's pronounced as ch instead of g. I chose to just pronounce it as ch. Same with th and dh. He understands that d and th, probably not correct, but that's the closest thing. So I'm gonna just pronounce it as written. Hey, my name is Carson Wody. His writing is not another spelling reform. It is an adaptation based on Dutch spelling standards. How easy is it for you to read? Would you like to see more examples of English written with a different languages standards? Now let us know in the comments what you think if you understand this.